Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Matchbook Horse Racing podcast. We've got a stellar team amassed for you. It feels like a real jumps core crew today. Let me introduce, first of all, Dan Overall at Over and Clear, who's joining us for the first time. Dan, how's things?
Yeah, very good, Tom. It's nice to be out of hibernation. The flat's out the way. We don't have to talk about any more of that. Pure jumps, and I think that's why I'm here for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
We're good to go. Proper racing.
Apparently, if they cut you in half, it says National Hunt in the middle. That's right, isn't it? That's you.
Pretty much, yeah. They did a little bit just to prove it, and they saw the N, but they didn't get all the way through. But yeah,
No,
that is me all the way.
And that's why you're still here. So good stuff. Yeah, Dan's a real jumps racing expert. Made an appearance on Racing TV where he immediately took the mick out of me, and he's been popular with everyone else ever since. So there you are.
Absolutely, mate. It's the solution to that. If anyone has any popularity issues, just give Tom Stanley some abuse. Honestly,
Yeah,
foolproof strategy.
Which is what DC's really made a name for himself doing. But not just that, he's also made a name for himself by being the king of the jumps. Exceptional stuff last week. Although weirdly, your biggest prize winner was on the flat, but you were 6 out of 8 on the podcast.
Yeah, it was just one of those days where it all went right. And it's great when it happens, but it's a tough game we're in. Could be nothing this week. So.
And we did manage, you and I managed to get the sort of obvious double, which was Pied Piper and August Rodin, wasn't it? 6.53 that paid. So that was our best bet double. So that copped, which was good news. And Charlie Post, I'm normally blowing smoke up your behind, but I'm not going to do it so at this point and just say, hi, Charlie, welcome along. How are you?
I'm good, Tom. Yeah. Can Deasy even remember his tips from last week? I mean, he looks fresh today. Look at him, smiling away, fresh as a daisy for the weekend revved. Yeah, he looks good.
That's the point. So before DC came on last week, he was worried about how much he'd had to drink the night before, and he nailed it. So I hope you were on the lash last night, Deece.
I was, Tom. I was.
Yes, that's what we like to hear.
I went out to watch the Man United game and had a great time, but I came home earlier.
Good. Okay, well, hopefully with all these winning tips, you can afford a new liver soon. Okay, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Remember to do so. It makes it easier for you to watch each and every podcast we do. That's across all sports, and listen as well. And don't forget, if you are watching us, all of these broadcasts are available as a podcast. And head to insights.matchbook.com for all the podcast best bets. Producer Daniel Hussey will have those up after we finish here. They'll be up later on today. We're going to start with the big one. We are completely split here, so I like this. It's not a 2-horse race, of course, because you've got Eldorado Allen in there for the Charlie Hall at 7.2, but Brave Man's Game is 2.6, moving as we speak in front of us. And you can see that a bit of that price has been taken recently, because 2.6 to back, 2.96 to lay. That will compact again, but that's because the horse is just shortened up a touch. 3.2 Ahoy Senor, 3.3 to lay, 7.2 Eldorado Allen, 12.5 Secret Investor, 15.5 Win My Wing Sam Brown, 22 Paint the Dream, 28. All right, Team Brave Man's Game, first of all, consists of Dan and DC. So Dan, overall, make your case for Brave Man's Game. Why him?
With pleasure. And almost I wanted to take him on when looking at this race initially. Like, I'm not convinced he'll be the best long-term 3-mile prospect here. I think the Ahoy Senor is definitely that. But when I kept looking at how this race might develop, particularly from a pace angle, you've got Ahoy Senor who will go forward. You've got 5 other pace angles, effectively. You've got Secret Investor, who we know is going to be ridden forward. His best performance when winning the Denman came when prominent on the inside. I imagine he'll try and do that again to almost put Ahoy Senor off and make him jump to the right, like what happened at Cheltenham when Lompress took him on. We know his jumping can disintegrate slightly. Paint the Dream has made all over shorter. Eldorado Allen made all when winning the Denman. So I just don't think Ahoy Senor is going to get an easy time out in front. And if his jumping frailties are there, I think in this company, they can be exploited. And also his record fresh isn't great. So I just kind of kept going back to Brave Man's Game. I think the race might just set up nicely for him. On ground, I think it's going to be about good to soft, which is probably his optimum. He's probably not going to be 100% for this. We know the King George is his main target, but I think he'll probably be further forward than Ahoy Senor, who may be thinking March long-term, whereas Brave Man's Game is probably all about the King George. I think Wetherby will suit. I think the strong pace will allow him to travel into the race quite nicely. And for all that he might not find massive for pressure over 3 miles, I think if a Hoist and Yours jumping does let him down slightly, which I think it might be the case that on good ground he's already kind of flown before a Hoist and Yours can rally. So I just kind of came back to him as the most likely winner.
Yeah, my selection is based purely on price. A bit like you were saying, maybe he's a bit bigger than you thought. For all I think Brave Man's Game is the better horse. I'm still with a Hoist and Yours at the prices. DC, flesh out the case for Brave Man's Game before Charlie and I go.
He was very, very good last year, and he just had the one little blot in his copybook, which was at age 3, and that happened the season before as well. That Hoist Senior were just maybe he just came to fresh. I know that Paul Nicholas has his horses ready to go at the start of the season, and I think that Brave Man's Game, they'll obviously have this lined up from a long way out. I think he will be 100% ready to go for this, and I think he might just be a bit of a better horse than a Hoist Senior. Hoist Senior has had a few kind of statement wins, but I think Brave Man's Game he gave him a good beat in the Kempton there last year. He's only 7. Like they do think he's a very good horse, and they'll take their time with him, and he'll improve as the years go on. And I was very strong on him all week. I think like he's a sharp price. It is a bit of a pick 'em, but I just think he will be absolutely spot on ready to go for this. And as Dan said, there's a lot of things in his favour in the race as well, the way it'll set up for him. So fairly strong on him for this, yeah.
Okay, Charlie, they're both rated 161. You can make your case after you've answered the question, who will end up rated the higher horse this season?
A Hoist and Yours.
Okay, well, make your case.
I think this horse has got a massive engine. I think he's underestimated because he came from English point of pointing and he's trained up north. The jumping right is interesting, but if you look back through his form, all his best form is left-handed. And I said, I think on the podcast before, I actually think he likes the freedom going left-handed to be able to shift right when he wants to put himself on the correct stride when he's going into a short stride. And I think at Kempton, he couldn't do that and he didn't enjoy it at all. And yeah, he got thumped by Brave Man's Game. But, again, I'm not convinced Cheltenham is his track either. And I thought he ran a massive race considering he missed a few fences, which Dan is right to highlight his jumping. But I think his jumping on flat tracks is way better than it was around Cheltenham, and I put him up as my star performer when we did the horses to follow. He was good round Wetherby in the Toten, however we're going to pronounce it, Novice Chase. And I just think this race is sort of made for him. I don't think he has to dominate, and I don't think he has to be down the outside. Inside, I actually think if I was Derek Fox, I would line him up with a little bit of room to allow him the freedom to shift right if that's what he wants to do, because I think he'd be way more comfortable than being trapped down the inside without the ability to do that. And he's by Dylan Thomas, who's unfashionable. There's loads of things that I think make people underestimate this horse. But I think when it comes down to latent talent, he's got a really big engine, this lad. And as a 7-year-old, he's a massive big horse. I think he's just come into his prime.
So I am putting him up today. I think Brave Man's Game will end up rated higher, and I really like him for the King George, depending on whether or not Allaho comes over. That could be a curveball. But I just think this way around, I take the point about jumping right, but he definitely has better form on a left-handed track. I think this track will suit ideally. I would have concerns about him going back to Cheltenham, although they were considering rolling the dice in the Gold Cup, I know, last year. But I just think this is the ideal sort of race for him. Maybe he will be slightly undercooked with targets towards the back end of the season, although Lucinda Russell seemed to put some of those concerns to bed earlier on this week. And I think for this first start of the season, respectively for both of them, at the prices, he's the bet. It's tempered by the fact that I'm a huge Brave Man's Game fan, and he was my sort of horse for the year. But that was very much with an eye on Kempton, so I'm in the Hoist in your camp. We are likely to get a fierce pace here, and that definitely makes it interesting. Just one thing I wanted to come back to, Dan, with you, a point you picked up on with how the race is going to be run. Do you think of a Hoist in your and Brave Man's Game, who is the most likely, do you think, to, if it is a fierce pace, just to take back? Do you think Brave Man's Game?
Yeah, I don't think that any chance Brave Man Games go forward here. I think they'll have, because they've got Secret Investor in the race. We know all his best performances are making all over 3 miles, like on good ground. I think he'll definitely make the pace with Ahoy Senor, and you'll probably have Eldorado Allen and Paint the Dream not too far away. I think they'll be quite content to take a lead on Brave.
And that tactically is interesting. I wonder if Paul Nicholls is thinking, right, well, Secret Investor, you can do your worst to Ahoy Senor up top.
Yeah, and it was interesting because I thought he would be properly geared for this because he's a difficult horse to place. But Paul was kind of indicating that Brave Man's Game is the more forward of the two, which to me was, I mean, you can take that on trust, I guess, but Paul's normally quite upfront with these things. But I was surprised by that. I thought it'd be the other way around, but he's definitely could be a bit of a foil for Ahoy Senor.
All right, anything else to say about the feature, chaps?
It's a cracking race, like for the Charlie Hall that often can be a bit of a damp squib. Like this is like, because like you say, when you chuck in Eldorado Allen, Win My Wings, who Christian Williams has been confident about as well and talking up, like it's a really, really good race, and like it's a proper spectacle, and I can't wait for this tomorrow.
Yeah, it is. It's a proper race for something else to go and win it, not the top two, and us.
Yeah.
To go, we only really talked about it. Yeah, cracking race. All right, let's kick on then. So we're going to go back in time now. We'll go through in chronological order. Goshen over fences 2.32, Samareve 3.9. This is a novice's handicap chase at Ascot. Samareve 3.9, Cobbler's Dream 5.2, Gal Road 6.6. I'm just going to kick off because I've got a pretty strong opinion that you can lay Goshen and feel pretty comfortable doing so. I don't think anyone is putting Goshen up. No, they're not. So we've basically got the whole field, a shout for each of them against Goshen, and I'm just laying Goshen because, you know, there's a chance that bigger obstacles will slow this horse down, but he doesn't look made for a fence, does he? And they're coming to it late. And in Samareve and Cobbler's Dream, they're proper horses who can make it into decent chases. I think he's a very take-onable favourite. So I'm very much lay Goshen. DC.
Yeah, I've gone for Goal Road. There's nothing between the three of them really. The other three, bar Goshen, in terms of their hurdling ability, I think they were all rated within a couple of pounds of each other. But I watched Goal Road's his debut over fences there. So I'm just going to bring it up here now. He was beaten by a Peter Bowen horse up at Perth there a couple of weeks ago. No, he was beaten 20 lengths, but he didn't really try once they were on the last fence. And the note, Racing Post note said that he was very novice jumping, and I watched it, and he was more over jumping, I think. But once he actually got into it and sped up, I thought his jumping improved a lot. No, he was giving stones away and to a horse that had loads and loads of experience. So I thought it was actually a much better run than it appears if you just looked at the bare form and actually watched the race. And as you said, like there's nothing between the three of them, and I wouldn't be ever back in Goshen really at this kind of price. So I'm just going to have it probably a minimum stakes bet on Goal Road.
Okay, Charlie.
Just going back to Goal Road, I mean, the one thing in his advantage is that they're going to start at the bottom of Swinley Bottom, so he's going to get to jump uphill all the way around to the winning post if he is sort of over jumping and novicey, because he definitely doesn't want to be over jumping when they turn down the hill. You know, as in it's certainly not the sort of place where you want to be landing out on your head. Again, I was against Goshen, minimal stakes race for me. Cobbler's Dream, I think is definitely going to do well over fences, but Ben Case a bit quiet, I thought, and I just wonder whether he might just need this. So I came down with Samareve. You know, I think he's got size and scope. He jumps a fraction right, so he should be happy enough at Ascot. Ended last season winning at Sandown, winning well, and he just seems like that sort of, you know, young horse that Paul Nicholls does well with. So it'll be a small stakes race for me. And like I say, it was more that I just had question marks over the other three, and I thought Samareve was sort of the rock solid one.
And Dan, just completing the trio against Goshen.
Yeah, I came down on Cobbler's Dream. I just thought it was very hard to knock what he did last year. Obviously, his novice hurdle form was very solid. Lanzarote winner did that very impressively. Second in the Martin Pipe after a 2-month break. You can pretty much write off Aintree. I think he had a long season by that stage. But his record fresh would also be a bit encouraging. He won his bumper debut in Ireland. He won his seasonal and stable debut last season. Now, obviously, Charlie makes the point about the yard being quiet, and that is very valid. They haven't had exactly an abundance of winners, but they haven't had an abundance of runners really lately. And Fernhill, who's probably one of their more standout horses, ran a decent race the other day. And I think given his kind of status in the yard, he's probably likely to be a bit more forward. I mean, obviously, Goshen's keeping all the other three out of the handicap. I don't necessarily think that's too much of a concern. And at the prices, he was just the way I wanted to play this. And for anyone wanting to back Goshen, I think they've probably got skydiving lined up tomorrow and then shark diving the day after. It's an activity like 2.3 Goshen chase debut. Like, I could not think of a more anxiety-inducing activity. Like, that is brutal.
It's terrifying. So I'm interested in possibly trying to trade in the race. So normally I'd say a front runner, you might be looking to trade shorter, but and this is an open question. Is there a chance that, I'm pretty sure he goes forward, but if he puts in a few sketchy leaps at the first view, he's going to trade bigger, isn't he? I feel like there's a point in the race where he is not favourite in the run.
I think there's every chance that he won't be favourite in the run because Jamie Moore, for starters, is going to, this is one of those as a jockey, you're kind of lining up and maybe you might have schooled well, but I mean, again, the start, the one thing in his favour is the start here is very generous to a free-going horse that might be a bit sketchy as they jump everything uphill. I think they jump 6 fences uphill, first of all, which might help. But you're still going to be going down the first couple hoping that he respects what he's doing and thinks about the job. And like you say, there's every chance if he doesn't, that he could be trading. He could be trading outside by the time they get to the winning post for the circuit to go, because I think he's one of those horses. If it's going to unravel, it could fall apart very quickly.
Also mad to think he's only 6. It feels like he's been around forever, but there we are, same age as Cobblers. All right, let's kick on to, or we're going back to Wetherby, the opening contest there. I'm sitting this one out. Thought it was too difficult, this novices hurdle. Prairie Rule 3.85, Learned a Lot 5.1. Incidentally, we have spoken to Ollie Murphy this morning, who says he's strengthened up a good bit and had some good form last year. He rates him as having a solid each way chance. Autumn Return 4.6. Joe The Dancer is 3.9 and has shortened up a little bit. But Cavity 10.5, Hall Lane 15.5. I'll leave it there and come straight back to Dan.
Yeah, I sided with Joe the Dancer. As you mentioned, he has contracted quite a lot in price recently. I just thought he was probably the most interesting profile coming into this. Obviously, he would have bolted up on his sole point to point before falling at the last. The form of that is mixed. The second and first have been beaten in subsequent points, but the third bolted up at a Kelson Maiden hurdle the other day. He's pretty well bred. He's out of a half sister to Captain CB, and we know Ben Pauling can pop up with hurdling debutant winners. He's only got an 11% strike rate with them, which sounds fairly modest, but you would have made a good profit backing them to SP blind. And he's won this race twice in 2017 and 2018. And if you look at how his yard are just kind of progressing, they didn't start off as hot as they normally do. They're just starting to hit their stride. You had Honor Gray was a nice winner at Aintree the other day. A few went close at Cheltenham, and throughout this week, his runners have been ticking over quite nicely. He's probably a bit on the short side now, if I'm honest. I thought he would be at least probably third favourite behind Prairie Wolf and Autumn Return, which hasn't quite transpired. But he's an interesting type. And to be honest, I think this could be a pretty decent novice hurdle.
Okay, yeah, looks it, doesn't it? And then a couple of shouts, the same ones for Charlie and Dees. Dees?
I was delighted to see Charlie pick this as well because I thought this was a bit of a dart. The one I'm going for is Macavity. Won an Aintree bumper there in May, but I thought he was very strong at the line. I thought he looked like he was being hard pushed to go when they turned into the home straight, but he just kept on going. Was strong at the line. He subsequently been moved to Jed O'Keefe, and they tried selling him, and he went unsold. So I presume he's still for sale, and hopefully he'll be tuned up well for this, and will run a big race, and they might get a few bob from them.
What do you want to add, Charlie?
Yeah, I mean, he finished third, well beaten the point-to-point that Mount Bonetti finished second in, who subsequently won a bumper. And the winner of that race, Holy Joe Smoke, went close in a novice hurdle at Chepstow earlier on this week. So I think the form is sound. He was just very raw in his debut. He then won his next 2 point-to-points and then won that point-to-point bumper up at Aintree. And yeah, like Dee says, I'd have thought he'd be very ready for this. And I just think he's a sort of horse that I just thought the price was too big, and so I just thought as a win and place option in a trappy race that there was a bit of upside to him. Learned a lot. We broke him in. He's a 6-year-old. He just taken forever to come to. Big, weak horse by Ars that always showed a bit of ability, but just taken forever to come to. Whether tomorrow's the day or not, but I think 110 is workable for him. He's one for the tracker moving forward. You know, I certainly think he can win a handicap off that, and he's a horse with definite upside.
All right. So what's happened, as you can see scrolling along the bottom of the screen, given that both the guys have spelt McCavity wrong, who copied and pasted who? Be honest.
I copy and pasted, Charlie. Yeah.
I did all my selections early today, so it's my fault. I'll take the blame.
No, it's not your fault. What it's not your fault. It's laziness on the part of hungover Micheál Deasy, right? He should have looked at it and gone, "Oh, not only will I be a nice guy and correct it, but no, he's just copied and pasted." You could have written anything there. I
do a lot of correcting in that document, capitalising the first letter and all this kind of stuff. You're so messy, but look, it seems like something that the producer might have picked up as well. But look,
always someone else to blame.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Get him out. DC out. Hashtag DC out. Good. And I was sitting it out because I think it's far too difficult. So a couple of shouts for McCavity, who's a big price, or a fair price, double figures, and Joe the Dancer, who has shortened up a bit for Dan. Moving on and moving back to Ascot. This is the 205 contest. Any harm in asking is 4.0. This is the London Handicap Hurdle. 4.0, any harm in asking. Broomfield Berg, 7.0. Hackaday Plus, 7.2, as is Washington. Again, Ollie Murphy, just for his comments on Washington. He rated him a solid each way chance. I didn't feel he was exuding confidence that he was, going to go and win the race necessarily. But we'll see how he gets on at 7.2. Call of the Wind has shortened up a bit there, 6.2. Highway 101, 9.8, 14.0, and bigger. The rest. Charlie Post, who do you like?
I'd say with Washington as well. I think Ollie's fairly sure that he wants to go up in trip, but he's been a bit keen, this horse, throughout his life, and I'd imagine he just wants to start him over 2 mile, hope they go a good gallop and get the horse doing things the right way. He'll win a decent pot somewhere this year. I just came down with the favourite. Any harm in asking? I mean, the Constitution Hill form is all there for all to see, and how he managed to start sort of handicap life off 114, I don't know, but fair play. I mean, he was some certainty at Catterick, and then he won again at Sedgefield. That his form is, underwhelming, and he's gonna have to step up a lot. But I think he still has enough ability, and talking to people within the yard, to think that 137 doesn't quite represent the ceiling of where he might end up still. So it's unoriginal, and again, it wouldn't be a huge bet for me, but I think this horse could end up having a big year. He is there a chance he could end up a graded performer? Potentially, I'd have said, maybe.
Well, yeah, 137. 137 now. I mean, you just don't know, do you? Given where he started off.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he fair play. He started life off the right mark. I mean, and like I say, maybe there's an element of underestimating him there even now. And like I say, I just wonder if 137 is still very workable. I think John Joe O'Neill, the team there, could have a really big year. They've invested a lot of money over the last 2 or 3 years at the sales. The 2 young lads, John Joe Jr. and AJ, having a big influence there, and I just think that they've been building to a point where they could have a real, not a breakout season, because crikey, John Joe's been there and done it forever. But in recent times, I think this could be a big year for them.
Oh, I think that's a fair point. The fact is, the last sort of half a decade, by and large, certainly the first few years of those were a bit disappointing, but they've been back on the up since. Right, any harm in asking for you, DC? I'm taking a flyer on Venetia Williams' horse here, which is Tanganyika, who was sent off at 12-1 on debut here off the back of some runs in France. It's purely because I'm taking the view that run was needed, and he could feasibly be well treated off a mark of 120. I don't know it. And a rising 5-year-old may have a difficult season, but I just didn't like anything towards the top of the betting. And maybe the horse wants easier ground, but I'm willing to take a chance, small win and place, because I thought any harm in asking. We haven't seen the horse for some time. The ground should be fine. But if there is rain around, if it gets to soft, then we'll see how he goes on that. And I mainly am not a fan of Broomfield Berg, which is why I pitched this as speaking to Deasy, who you like. He just doesn't convince for me, Deasy. So how do you see that? I know he's got some really good form. How do you see this working out for Broomfield Berg?
I think the drop back and trip will help him because this is obviously his second run after wind surgery as well. Look at his best runs last year at the start of the season, and he's running off the same mark now as he was at Cheltenham last year, where he was beaten by Lovely Citizen when he ran like, I don't know what he ran like, not great. He should have won that race easily, but he was out there at Chepstow there a few weeks ago, finishing behind Nappers Hill. 3 lengths third. No, he was just completely gassed at the end. I don't think he had anything left, but that should have blown the cobwebs off nicely. It's more of a price thing, isn't it? I thought he was a nice price, like 7.0 there. Like I think he was a bigger price during the week, but I think there's definitely some ability there. You know, he's a hard horse to win with, but if the wind surgery and maybe a bit more experience has done the trick, like there's definitely room from over there off 130. So I think he's a good chance. So I'll probably just go win only with him. I think this is an open race. I was very close to tipping Any Harm in Asking, but I think there's a bit of reputation built into his price. So I just went for something a bit bigger. So I can see Broomfield Berg running well. Okay,
and Dan, who do you like?
I've gone for Magistrato. It's a bit of a flyer in a race that I think is pretty trappy. I think you mentioned a lot of these are entered in the Greatwood. Any Harm in Asking, Call of the Wild, Hacker de Place is one Nichols has already said is going down the Greatwood route. Whether they're going to be fully tuned for this as a result, considering they'll probably already get into the Greatwood off their current marks, would raise a few questions with me. And so I ended up going with Magistrato. I think if you said at the beginning of last season he'd end up with a mark 119 and be unfancied off of it, you'd be pretty disappointed. I mean, he was rated 131 after his win at Chepstow as a juvenile. He shaped pretty well behind Night Salute at Cheltenham the time after, and it just kind of all went a bit wrong after that. He did pretty well in the circumstances in a 4-year-old handicap at this track towards the end of last season. But he just pulled his way through that race. He took himself to the front. It was just raw ability that meant he had any chance when they jumped the second last that day. And if you look where the front 3 all came from, they all came from rear. He basically helped set that race up. Now, he's got a profile that's not too dissimilar to a horse we've seen make hay earlier this season called Sonagino for Paul Nichols, in that he's a young French recruit having his second season for Paul. He made a promising start to the season and it all just kind of went downhill from there. And Sonagino's proved a revelation after a break and after a wind-up. Magistrato's had the wind-up. He's also got a hood on for the first time, which he clearly needs. Nichols has a 20% strike weight with hood for the first time. And Paul did win this race with a 4-year-old back in 2011 as well. He has the ability off this kind of mark to be competitive. We know he goes well fresh from last season. And I think in a strongly run handicap where if he can just settle in behind, I can see him there coming with a run. But he's also got massive blowout potential because he's a 4-year-old. We're still learning about him. So it's a win-only play and a small one, but I thought he was an interesting horse in this race.
I wonder if we can just get the market back up and I'll just flesh out those prices a little bit. We've got Any Harm in Asking and Magistrate. Any Harm in Asking, Broomfield Berg, who are a bit more towards the top of the betting, 4.1 and 7.0, and then going down to Tanganyika and Magistrato, 22.0, 14.0. So there you are. I'd take the same opinion as Dan, that I'd rather just have something a bigger price on side. All right, let's move on. We are going back to Wetherby. And this is the mares, isn't it? We're up for the mares next? Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. So I think you're going to have Ollie's Wishes right towards the top of the betting here. Interestingly, I think we're all different views on this one. I thought there might be a bit more consensus here, but we've managed to put up 4 different horses in this contest. So 2.48, Martello Sky is 3.05, 5.1 Nina the Terrier, See the Sea 10.5, and Island Mahi 27.0. Okay, Martello Sky for Charlie.
Yeah, I mean, it's a trappy race, isn't it? Molly Ollie's Wishes won this last year, and it is obvious, that this is going to be a big target early in the year. I mean, I just felt probably at the weights, I could see a bit of upside in Nina the Terrier, and I was kind of half trying to come down with her, but, got beat at Chepstow. Whether she wants a little bit further, I couldn't make my mind up. And so I just felt it was between the top 2 in the end. And I just thought conceding £2 Molly Ollie's wishes to Martello Sky might be enough to tilt the balance in her favour, and she just might have a little bit more progress in her this season, this filly of Lucy Wadham's, than the favourite of Dan Skelton's, and that was what it came down to for me.
Yeah, I just like horses doing what they've done before, and this is exactly what Molly's Ollie's Wishes did last year. Off a similar sort of break, although slightly less last year. I think she's actually rated lower than when she won this race last year. I take the point she's got to give weight away, but we know she's this good, and we know she goes okay fresh, for all Martello Sky does as well. I just thought it was a race that lacked a bit of depth, and she's just about a backable price for a yard that have really hit the ground running this season proper. So Molly Ollie's Wishes for me, but it would be small stakes. No, really confident shout. Greetings, Trevor, by the way. Trevor says, welcome. Pleasant morning to all, and greetings from Trinidad and Tobago. Love that. I don't know what time it is there. Got to be early, isn't it? But welcome along. DC.
Taking another bit of a flyer on Nina the Terrier. No, she's very badly off at the weights when you look at her handicap mark. But she was beating a Chepstow debut, but she was giving £12 to Sangino, who went out and won again after that race. I mean, he's obviously very well in himself and fully tuned up. She had great form the start of last season. She won at Chepstow. She beat a horse with no name in the second round there at Newbury and was running a cracker. In November behind LA Bell when she fell at the last. Form kind of fell off, I think, maybe a bit in the second part of the season, but I think there's probably a bit of progression in her. I think she can improve past these, hopefully. And again, she's at a decent enough price, 5.0. So I'll just take. I have a little win bet on her.
Okay, and as we always encourage, given the trading platform that the Match Betting Exchange is, a back to lay or a later back, whatever you want to do, is very welcome. Dan, you've got one for us here with C the C, a back to lay.
Yeah, I just think we know with these kind of tactics, you want something, you pretty much know what you're going to get, and with her, you pretty much do. She's going to be the sole front runner of this race. Look, she doesn't have the class of some of these, but she isn't massively out of it on a pure weights and measures scale, and she's a brave front runner who we know is also race fit. I mean, she was going to be second to So Royale at Kempton the other day. Would have finished ahead of Sebastopol, but for clattering the second last. That isn't actually like her. She's normally quite a decent jumper. But for that kind of a run, considering she was also taken on by For Pleasure that day, who not many can really compete with for the lead, I thought that was almost career best level for her, for a mare that's been on the go for a while and has been progressive. But I think that was another step in the right direction. The short turnaround is no concern. She won 3 times in 21 days, this time last year. I think the ground, as it stands, good to soft, is probably just as soft as she wants it. So I'm hoping for no more rain for her. And of the others, I like the idea that she's a proper 2-miler who will make all. And the others, you could argue, all want further. Molly Ollie's Wishes, Martello Sky, Nina the Terrier, all included in that. So there's a chance she might just be able to nick a bit of a lead, and you might see the others get pushed along earlier than ideal, and she'll trade significantly shorter on the running.
I feel that's a good chance to just touch on the weather. There is a good bit of rain around tomorrow at Wetherby, potentially, isn't there? What are people sort of generally working off likely racing conditions? Good to soft, softer than that?
I'm going good to soft, yeah. Like it's good to soft, good in place as it stands. As you say, the forecast is a bit all over the place. It seems like there could be a few mils around, but I say that depending on what site you check, it varies. So I thought good to soft was the cautious way of going about it.
Okay. And Ascot as well, Charlie, might get a bit of rain, but maybe not as much as Wetherby, but they're a bit more sort of scattered showers. Are you working good to soft there?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we would be, I mean, look, not that it's so localized at times, but we wouldn't be much more than an hour from Ascot, and we have had a lot of rain over the last week. I mean, I get that, you know, a lot of these tracks, they've not been watered through the summer, etc. But I'd have thought it'd be lovely ground at Ascot tomorrow. Like, yeah, good to soft is definitely where I'd be thinking that they're going to start off the meeting. Yeah.
Okay, no excuses ground anyway. Right, 240 at Ascot is a good-looking handicap chase, and before midnight 5.8, Amula Gold 6.0, Ferrero Bamboo 6.8, 7.4, Nasalam on Sulacox 7.8, Time White 9.2, 10.0, and Bigger the Rest. Charlie, you and I agree. You can make the case first of all.
Well, I mean, I'm just looking on my Racing Post app, and they're giving it as a non-runner. So yeah, I mean, I really thought we kind of found one here, and the big thing, just for anyone, is that Freddie Ginger was going to be riding this horse, claiming £10 off his back. Who he rode a lot of winners in British point to points last year. As he's only 16, I think he's Colin Tizard's grandson, or you know, and so he's a really talented young man. And I thought, the £10 off Diego de Charmel's back made him very interesting. But like I say, I've scanned down, and he's a non-runner. So yeah, move on.
Do you have okay, fine. Do you have another view, or you don't have to at all? Because I was with you on this one.
No, I don't. I'm not going to make a snap decision on something now.
Yeah, fine. All right. So that's good. Two are out. I mean, two of our bets are out. We both had Diego de Charmel. Go on then, Dan. Gumball.
Yeah, this is a really tough race. I mean, you've got a lot of the kind of usual Ascot suspects in here that have been butting heads earlier last season. So a lot of form lines coming back together off different weights. I kind of went down a different route of it rather than dissecting all of those. I just thought Gumball, he's been around a long time, but he hasn't had many chances for Fergal yet. And I just thought he was a bit of an interesting type here. He had a nice spin on the flat the other day, finishing second off a mark of 92. Shows he's in decent form. And the last time he had a similar prep to that was last season, before he ran the graduation chase at Carlisle, where he ran a close-up fourth behind the likes of Melodrama and Warlord, who he was giving £4 to. In third, you had Cheddleton, who ran consistently well off marks in the high 140s last season. And you go back to March, Gumball was one of the gambles of the day in the Grand Annual. I think he opened at about 40-1. He went off 14-1. It was just the case of far too much rain that day, scuppered any chance he had. But as a result, he's been dropped £3 to a career low mark 137. If you go back to the last time he was on a mark in the 130s, he won a listed handicap hurdle at Ascot 139. He's got the ability to feature in a race like this. And unlike some, we know he's fit from his spin on the flat. And I just thought he's got a race like this in him, and he's a fair price at the minute as well.
Okay, it's 5:37 in Trinidad and Tobago, by the way. I know you were all wondering.
AM or PM?
Oh, AM. Very much AM. Early rising. So my second shout was Monsieur Lecoq. Off the back of that run at Chetstone, I think I'm sort of confident enough to go with him here. I'd want him to have the lead. Nassalam might have something to say about that, but he might just come on for the Chepstow reappearance.
Yeah, they gave him a similar prep to last year. Last year he ran a fast last, and then ran he ran second in the race. He was given the race when the Moolah Call was disqualified, but he ran a cracker in that, and he is actually running off £2 less this year, which will tell you how the rest of the season went. But yeah, it's just like as you said, no, this is a very tough race. I think Before Midnight is the best horse in the race, but I was operating on soft ground. I think it will be soft at Ascot. I was looking from the weather forecast I was looking at. I expect there'll be a good bit of rain, and I don't think Before Midnight wants soft ground. I think he likes the surface a bit better. So I just said I go for Monsieur Lecoq just to run a big race, same as he did last year. Again, he's off a nice plate. He's only 8. There's plenty more to come from, and he's been backed as well. He was a much bigger price there Tuesday, Wednesday. So good to see a bit of market confidence.
And just to flesh out Before Midnight, I spoke to Sam Thomas earlier on in the week, who sort of indicated this was it for not it for him, but he was very much targeting this race. He won fresh last year, and he thinks he might find it difficult off this sort of mark. He said he's in that sort of bracket, isn't he? 147. I just got the impression he wasn't convinced he'd be a sort of good thing at the top of the market off this mark, but he had him ready for it. But on that note, I just felt there might be something else that was better value in the race.
He would have won the Grand Annual last year only for that rain, lads. He would have won the Grand Annual. Months and months of anti-post betting.
The joys of anti-post betting.
At least you've got over it.
Yeah.
A few whiskies were sung then.
It was Bondor a few years ago, and that was Before Midnight.
Maybe just stop betting on the Grand Annual anti-post.
Yeah.
Maybe that.
You don't know that Steve Jones still hasn't got over his anti-post bet for Edwardstone in the Champion Hurdle about 3 years ago. He never even ran it. But now that,
So
now that he won a
close.
grade one over fences, he's like, I told you. Anyway, let's kick on then. We are going to the hurdle, Bet365 hurdle. Is this the West Yorkshire hurdle, formerly known as? Anyway, 2.8
Yes.
on Indefatigable, last year's winner 4.6, Prashima 5.0, 3 under through 5, 7.6, 9.8, Thomas Darby, Australian 19.5. Matchbook ambassador Ollie Murphy, talking about Thomas Darby, the one sort of concern point he had was that he felt he'd take a bit of a step forward for the run, but thought he'd go well. He was looking forward to running him. Okay, how many shouts have we got for Sporting John? Me and DC. All right, we agree here. DC, I just thought this horse was pretty obviously the one to beat. I think he can pick up where he left off with his hurdles career. We know on his day he's a grade one performer, but there are better horses than him over fences. There are better horses than him probably over hurdles, but I'm not sure they're in this field.
Yeah. Asher, just looking at the ratings there, like he's only Thomas Darby is the same as him. He's well clear of them. He's top class horse. I think even if there's a bit more rain, that will be in his favour. I don't think he wants it really, really heavy, but he can handle soft ground. I'm glad they're sticking with the hurdling with him and not going to try chasing again, because it just didn't work at all. And he's a favourite, but he's a worthy favourite, and I can see him. If he's on a good day and he's fully tuned up and he wants to win, he should win this fairly easily.
Yeah. Okay. So Charlie, why not Sporting John?
I was slightly concerned about the Philip Hobbs yard, and two, I just think he's got to give a bit of weight away all round, and I just want like the Warwick win was visually impressive and in the Potemps qualifier, but I don't know. I just thought he still had to step forward a little bit. If I'm honest, I thought giving a weight away might be tricky against some in this field. Much as I do accept it's a trappy old race, and I just again a bit of a fly with 3 under through 5, as in Paul might be using this as a stepping stone to something else back over fences. But I thought he was a pretty decent novice hurdler. He had a very good novice chase campaign, and he stays very well. He'll gallop. He gets weight off Sporting John, and I thought it was a race lacking depth, but I also wasn't completely sold on a short price favourite at the top of the market, Tom.
Okay, and Dan?
I came down with a Prashima, and to be fair, the more I think about it, he's one of those horses you'd feel almost silly for being confident in, but I think this is the kind of race he should be winning, given how he's been prepared for it. Obviously, he was second in the race last year. Indefatigable that day, just got first run, and he could never quite pull her back, which I think contributed to that. We know Prashima does tend to travel well and not find as much as he should. Maybe that's part of it, but I thought tactically it just didn't work out for him that day. He's coming here off a near identical prep to last year, beating 12 lengths in the Silver Trophy, where not knocked about at all. This time he's £6 better off with Indefatigable. I think that could be enough to turn the tide with her. She's also had a similar prep, but last year she had a 26-day break between running on the flat. This time it's only 12. Whether that's too short a turnaround for her, I'm not sure. She's got a hardy mare, so maybe not, but just something to bear in mind. He's also £6 better off with Thomas Darby, despite beating him comfortably last year. And you forget in the Potemps qualifier that Sporting John won at Cheltenham last season, Prashima was sent off a shorter price, off £5 worse terms than they meet here that day. And he was going very well when falling 2 out. So if that panned out differently, we could be looking at a very different complexion of this race here. And again, on Sporting John, I'm just, like Charlie mentioned, the yard form is a concern. Some of them have been running really, really below form. They had a winner the other day, but basically nothing else finished that race. So it was almost irrelevant to count. The likes of 3 under 3 5.
What was that winner called, Dan? Can you remember?
Dan's chosen by any chance? Yeah. There we go. Well, my granddad backs anything with my name in, so I think pretty much any horse that wins with Dan in, he'll basically text me about it. I don't think that's a profitable strategy to follow, so don't go with that. But yeah, I just thought Prashima at 5. I think he is trading. I think that's reasonable enough value.
Okay. Incidentally, Dan, you've obviously you've got somebody to plant a comment. Says this Dan Overall fella is mustard. What a debut!
Ah, there they are. There you see. Yeah, absolutely. There's a few more coming.
You told us to do that at 10:15, didn't you? Not 10:45, but there you go.
Well, you pay cheap rates, you get cheap results, I guess. But hey, at least they came eventually.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, let's move on to. God, this is tough. We are done there, aren't we? We all had to go there. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. This is the feature handicap at Ascot. 5.9 Major Dundee. R Power 6.4. T Clipper 7.6. 11.5 Ansam fullback. Kitty's Light 13.0. What else? We've got 14.0 Mr. Malarkey and Danny Kerwin. I'll leave it there because we've got a couple of shouts for those. My obvious one is Mr. Malarkey. Small bet, win and place. Obviously, course and distance winner. Ran pretty well for Richard Bandy on first start, so won't need the run. The yard are going along okay. He really likes this track, and he's still a fairly treated horse. I just thought he was overpriced for all I can see him being beaten. I thought he was definitely overpriced. Ran a good race last time. Charlie.
Yeah, real flyer. This up the straight for Richard Rowe and James Davis. He probably should have won at Fontwell at the end of last month. He idled badly after jumping the last, looking like he'd win. He's bits and pieces of Ascot form. I think he won. He's won off a mark similar to today. He won at Sandown at the end of last season off 127. But he's never tried this sort of 3-mile trip, and I thought that was quite interesting. Actually, I think he looks like a horse that should stay that far. And like I say, he's had a run already. Looking back through the last 10 years of this, it's a bit of a mixture of horses winning on debut and horses that have had a prep run already. But I don't think it can do him any harm. And I just thought he was overpriced, if I'm honest. I didn't really think on form he deserved to be outsider of the whole lot. So yeah, win and place for me up the straight.
DC.
I have changed at the last minute to Ansam from T Clipper. Ansam he's very good course form there. He won over 3 miles at Ascot there last December, and he won very well. I suppose the main concern will be that he hasn't had a prep run, that he's going into this as a seasonal debut. I think there's a few of them there have had their runs, but I think he's I just really like the style of his win last year. It kind of stuck with me, and I had a good look at two of them. I think T Clipper is probably worth the look as well, but happy enough to stick with Ansam just with the course form.
Okay, and Dan, last up here.
Yeah, this is a really tough race. On up the straight, I actually agree with Charlie to an extent. I think he's very interesting. He's probably overpriced. I think he'll stay 3 miles. And he's obviously had a prep run as well. I eventually came down on R Power. I think you mentioned earlier, Tom, the Sam Thomas team are getting them ready for this weekend. R Power definitely falls into that bracket because they need him to run well if they're going to run in the Hennessy. And that seems to be the target down the line. He's still unexposed as a staying chaser. He made steady progress over intermediate trips last year before finishing third behind the Christian Williams duo of Kitty's Light and Captain All in his first go at 3 miles at Kempton. And then in the Ultima, he was very much an eye-catcher that day. Travelled into the race really well, made a nice move on the outside. Just not sure if he got home over the extended 3 miles that day after a bit of a hard season as well. And he also came into that off from £2 out of the handicap. So in theory, he's back £2 for that effort. Again, I think a lot of these, you're going to have queries about whether they're ready for this race. And Sam would be one of them. I think Evan Williams wouldn't be known as the most optimistic trainer at the best of times. But even by his standards, he's been pretty downbeat about Ansem's chance of being ready for this. But I think he's a nice staying chaser to note going forward. So I think our Power is just a solid option. He might find one or two too good, too well handicapped. So I've gone win and place, but I thought he was the solid option in the race.
Him or Jeremy Scott in a sort of battle for least trainer. Yeah,
that's a tough one. No one wins, I don't think.
It's a toss-up. We see. Oh, you've had a go, haven't you?
I've had a go, yeah. The horse that won't be ready for the race.
Yeah.
Hey, it'll be a nice clip if he wins.
That's right. Yeah, forgot about that. Good. There we are. Let me tell you about the sign-up offer then. So it's the £30 welcome offer for new customers only. It's the best way of supporting this podcast if you do like our content and you don't have a Matchbook account, because if you open up a Matchbook account and you can effectively place a risk-free bet on the horse racing, then having a Matchbook account is supporting Matchbook and it's supporting our content as well. You can have a bet up to £30, and if the horse doesn't win, you'll get a free bet back in your account up to £30. You've got to use the bonus code Insights 30, Insights 30 to take a advantage of that. It's for new customers only, and 18 plus BeGambleAware as ever. £30 welcome offer for new customers. Okay. Any other bets? So these aren't sort of official bets, but I'm keeping a track of how we're doing. We're 4 from 5 now. One of our horses to follow, and the jumps horses last weekend let us down. It was backed into an odds-on favourite. It didn't cop, so there we are. But the Devil's Coachman is another one. Now, I don't know what price this horse is going to be back over fences in the 115 on Sunday at Galway, but I thought I'd flag it up. The Devil's Coachman, I think that was one of Don's against for Noel Mead back over fences on Sunday. So keep an eye on how that goes. Charlie, you wanted to mention Fingal Bridge, Ollie Murphy's bumper runner today.
Yeah, I think Dees did as well. We broke him in. He's a 3-year-old he's a 4-year-old now by Flemonsforth. He always showed plenty here, and I know Ollie was pleased with him. He's been bought by high-profile connections. I think the McNeil family own part of him. I would imagine, therefore, that Adrian Heskin would have ridden him a bit at Ollie's and would have flagged it up to them that he thought he was worth buying. Ollie's got a 25% strike rate in bumpers, that they tend to be, they do very well in this sort of area. I spoke to Ollie earlier. He did say that he wants to make sure the ground is safe enough for him. But yeah, he runs in the 4:45 today at Utoxeter, and I think he's sort of 4 to 1, 9 to 2, something like that. I don't know what matchbook, what price we've got on the exchange, but he'd be worth an interest. I think he's a sort of horse that would go and run very well in one of these types of races. Yeah,
he's third in the betting there, behind a horse with experience and another newcomer. Okay, back to lays, or best lays first of all. My lay is Gosh, and I just think he's an absolute take-on job. And there's part of me that thinks with his engine, if he does jump the first few scruffily, and he eases out, I can see him still running on, because it's not going to be anything under the bonnet that stops him. It just might be his jumping. So you could always look to trade in the run, because I think the odds will move in your favour if you lay him before the race. And I'd lay him early as well, because I can see people out to take him on in what is a race, for it's only a 4-run race with a bit of depth to it. I think he'll go off bigger than he is currently. Charlie.
Well, I mean, I'm going to go against you and D, so I'm taking on Sporting John. I just thought conceding the penalty up at Wetherby might be tough, and I'm concerned about the yard form. And yeah, anything under 3.0, I'd be happy to be against him.
Okay, and you can remake that back to lay case, Dan, for C the mare.
Yeah, in a field where most would probably want further than 2 miles, she's the proven 2-mile front runner in the field, who's race fit, probably coming off a career best behind So Royale. Would have finished second to him if not for clattering the second last that day. I think there's a chance on predicted better ground. She might just be able to nick a few lengths off these and might have a few of them at it early on. And considering I think she's 10 currently, she could easily hit like 3 in running, I'd say, if it kind of works out. And I don't think there's anything that's really going to take her on for the lead either. So I think she's a good back to lay.
And just with that, if you haven't done it before on the exchange, anyone, it's you control how much you're laying off. So you might back her and then lay off the whole of your bet for effectively a free bet to win some money. You might only look to lay off part of it. You can really control it how you want to, depending on your confidence, how she's raced so far in the race, etc. So have a play around with that, but it's all about predicting which way the odds are going to move and hopefully in your favour. And we're done there, aren't we? All those 3. And then best bets. DC, who is your best bet this Saturday?
Yeah, I've gone for Brave Man's Game. I thought it was hard to be very confident in one of the other races, so I think he was definitely my favourite pick of the week, and I think he'll win. So Brave Man's Game.
Okay, good. My best bet is Sporting John, Charlie's lay. So I've got nothing else to say about that. Nothing. Charlie.
Well, if I'm going to lose out, Tom, I'll happily lose out to you if you get it right and I get it wrong. I'll take it on the chin. We got to put up a best bet, but I think it's really tough this weekend. And I tried to change it to Diego de Charmel, who's now a non-runner. But I would stick with my original selection. In any harm in asking, I like to say, I think there is upside in his mark. And I think John Joe O'Neill, I think they could have a really good year this time round. And this horse could end up rating a good bit better than what he's starting off this season of 137.
Oh, Dan, sorry, your best bet.
Yeah, so I've gone a bit off piste. I've gone to Air in the 2:33. Seasonal debut for Recall, which is a bit of a concern, but I think the yard's basically readying all their big guns for this weekend. If you look at the entries they've got, it's like the likes of Elvis Mal, Ginger Mal, Dubai Days, all their kind of big guns are being prepared for this weekend. I just think this race is pretty poor. And if you look at what he achieved last season, he was a revelation in these 3 mile handicaps on decent enough ground, which he looks like he's going to get. He won on seasonal reappearance last term as well, albeit off a lower mark. He bumped into a Charles Burns horse in the Potemps qualifier on his penultimate run, but they pulled a mile clear, and he probably was a bit unfortunate how that race played out tactically. And I think he's just run better races against better horses than he's facing here. A lot of these are out of form, regressive, or have quite a fair bit to prove. I think if you can get above 5-2 on him, I think he's a reasonable bet. And for all that he's on,
6.0. That's 6.0.
I mean, I think that's a cracking bet. He should be favourite for this race by some distance, I think.
Okay, good stuff. Imagine bumping into a Charles Burns horse in a Potemps qualifier. It doesn't get more brutal than that.
I know.
Good stuff, everyone. Enjoyed that. DC, Dan, Charlie, thank you very much indeed. Don't forget to head to insights.matchbook.com for a recap of all the best bets. They'll be up there a little bit later on. Have a good weekend all. Bye-bye.